So everyone knows what happened with Will Smith and Chris Rock. Will Smith reactively got up and in an instant, potentially threw away decades of work right before his crowning achievement of getting an Oscar for Best Actor Award. In this video, I'm going to explain some psychological reasons why Will Smith made this huge error. It's very common for someone right before their biggest success to radically self-sabotage. I'm going to explain what may happen as a result to Will Smith, because one of the greatest challenges that people face, it's one of the most psychologically destructive and most crippling experiences, is the feeling of having gone backwards. Think about, for example, the stock market. The stock market may be up, 100% over the last 3 years. But if it's gone down by like 5 or 6%, is all the person can see is where they are compared to the top. They can't see all of the gains that they've made along the way. And so I'm going to break down 3 of the core psychological reasons that Will Smith likely led to this massive subconscious self-sabotage. The first one is a concept that comes from Dr. Gay Hendricks. He's an amazing psychologist. He wrote a book called The Big Leap, which is a book I highly recommend. It is fundamental reading. But in The Big Leap, Dr. Gay Hendricks explains a concept called the upper limit problem. According to Dr. Gay Hendricks, we all have an inner thermostat, an inner subconscious baseline. Your subconscious is essentially your comfort zone. It's your baseline. It's what's safe to you. Anything outside of your safety zone or your comfort zone, your subconscious is going to retract back. And so according to Dr. Gay Hendricks, whenever we start making strides in any area of our life, whether it's creativity, whether it's money, whether it's happiness, whether it's relationships, whenever we start making advancements beyond our inner thermostat, we will subconsciously do something to pull us back to that inner thermostat. And that is what he calls an upper limit problem. We all limit ourselves on what we allow ourselves to have in terms of happiness, in terms of joy, in terms of creativity, in terms of money, in terms of success. It's pretty obvious that Will Smith had a massive upper limit problem in achieving this success. He was about to receive an Oscar, which is likely something that he's visualized and wanted and seen himself getting for decades. And literally less than an hour before receiving it, his upper limit problem occurred. And he found a way to sabotage his own success. He found a way to retreat from his vision of his future self. And he pulled himself way, 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 way down to some subconscious level that he has not resolved. Obviously, there's massive internal trauma and it's really far down there. And he basically plummeted himself as far as he could down there. Now, there's another great quotation or concept, and that's the idea that how you do anything is how you do everything. So this is number 2. How you do anything is how you do everything. Our identities really get crippled when we allow mediocrity into our lives. And it's obvious that when you look at Will Smith's marriage, that he tolerates something that fundamentally he does not want. His wife cheats on him, doesn't really want him. And you get in life what you're willing to tolerate. If you tolerate being treated like crap, then you're going to be treated like crap. There's a great quote actually from James Allen. He says, "We attract not what we want, but what we are." And how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you're allowing massive mediocrity in any aspect of your life, that's going to cripple every other aspect of our lives. We are holistic beings. Our lives are a system. You can't let a virus into one aspect of your system and not think it's going to infect the whole system. There's a great book actually by Gary Cady. It's called Raise Your Healthy Deserve Level. And in that book, he talks about how in life, we do not get what we deserve, but we get what we believe we deserve. And so if a person has unhealthy or toxic relationships, it's because that's what they believe they deserve. They're desperate. And if a person, as an example, if a business has a lot of toxic clients that are needy or rough or just honestly annoying, if a business allows those kind of clients to continue, those clients will infect the whole system. Joe Polish, the founder of Genius Network, actually has a concept for this. He calls it ELF versus half. He says that ELF people are easy, lucrative, and fun. ELF is an acronym, easy, lucrative, and fun. Whereas he said half people are hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. Chris Voss, who wrote the book, Never Split the Difference, took Joe's framework and he decided to actually analyze it and study it from a behavioral standpoint. And what he found is that if a person allows even one half person in their life or business, that one basically negative, rough person will push away 3 to 5 great ELF people from your life. And so if you let one toxic person into your life, and if you tolerate that, if you allow that, what that says is that you don't believe you deserve better relationships and that you're willing to be desperate. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, actually has a similar concept on this. He calls it always be the buyer. He says in relational situations, there are buyers and there are sellers. The seller is someone who's trying to sell themselves. They're trying to sell a product. Think of like a car salesman. They're trying to make the sale. They're desperate for your business. And they'll do all sorts of uncomfortable things to get your business. So if you're a seller in a relationship, what that means is that you're desperate to have the relationship and you will yield to the terms of the other person, even if those terms are completely ridiculous and terrible for you. I was actually in this situation with my previous publisher. I had published a book and it was with a very prestigious publisher. And I was then submitting my next book proposal to write the next book and they rejected it. They said, we don't want that book. And that was the book I wanted to write. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll come up with a different book. After rejecting 2 or 3 of my ideas, they finally accepted one of the ideas and they accepted it for half the amount of money that I wanted. In a lot of ways, I was selling myself to them because I was so desperate to be with that publisher that I was essentially willing to accept anything. Once I started to recognize the difference between being a buyer and a seller, if you're the buyer, you know what you want and you're willing to walk away. You're not desperate. The buyer is the person who can walk away from the situation. And ideally in healthy relationships, both people have the buyer mentality, that both people are clear on what they want. Both people have a shared vision. Both people are there out of autonomy and choice. There's complete respect for the differences in the relationship and it's a healthy collaboration. It's interdependent rather than an unhealthy dependence and an unhealthy attachment. And so it's obvious with Will Smith that how he's doing anything is how he's doing everything. If you allow something so unhealthy and so destructive as his codependent and unhealthy and seller mindset, he has a seller mindset in his relationship with his wife. He's desperate to be there. She's obviously the buyer in that situation. She could walk away at any moment. She's setting the terms. He's desperate to be there. And so he's folding himself in and out, being all sorts of things he doesn't want to be because he's desperate to be there. If there's something that ridiculous going on in someone's life, it's going to translate into all other aspects of your life. This goes back to having a healthy deserve level, that if you justify mediocrity in one area of your life, it's going to negatively impact your identity, where you're not going to believe you deserve better things. Let me give a simple example. If you have clutter in your house or in your car, that says that you don't believe you deserve a nice car. And although that may seem small, that's going to translate to other areas of your life, like the amount of money you believe you deserve. How you do anything is how you do everything. If you study people like Michael Jordan, as an example, he always had an immaculate car. He came to work dressed in a suit, like completely sharp, whereas the other basketball players sometimes came dressed in hoodies and stuff like that. Like Michael came in a very nice car. It was spotless. He was in a completely slick suit. How he did anything is how he did everything. And how he did anything impacted the performance that showed up on the court. And so when you see someone falling apart publicly, it's because they're falling apart privately. Actually, Stephen R. Covey said that private victory precedes public victory. The only way to start succeeding at the highest level publicly is if you're succeeding privately. And one thing to note in all of this is that there is a concept known as success disease, that often once you start making that high level of success, it can be really hard to maintain it. And this goes straight back to the upper limit problem. Success becomes the catalyst for failure, as Greg McKeown would say in the book Essentialism. Often once you start getting successful, it becomes really hard to maintain that and you lose your focus. You start having shiny object syndrome. You chase what are called quick wins or lesser goals. There's a great quote from Robert Brault. He said, "We're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." So what happens is once you become successful, now all of a sudden you have all these options and opportunities and you start to get overconfidence. You start to think you can handle the distractions. You think you can handle small losses. You start making impulsive decisions and you think, $10,000 here's not that problem. You start throwing things away and all of a sudden, all of those little losses start to accumulate. And eventually, too many small losses, you can't sustain it. And all of a sudden, and again, how you're doing anything is how you're doing everything. If you're justifying all of these small losses, this is the upper limit where you're about to plummet. There's actually a really, really good book on this subject. It's actually called Peaks and Valleys by Spencer Johnson. He wrote the book Who Moved My Cheese, by the way, which is a classic. But basically in Peaks and Valleys, he talks about how the bad things that happen in people's lives, the bad things happen because of what they do on their peaks. A peak is when you're advancing forward and you're making progress, you've got momentum and you're seeing success. So you're on a peak and the bad things happen when you based on what you do on those peaks. Often people don't know how to handle the peaks, and so they create unnecessary valleys because they do really stupid things on those peaks. By the way, from a bigger picture standpoint, Will and Ariel Durant, the famous historians, have a book called The Lessons of History. And they talk about the rise and fall of nations. And they talk about how every superpower eventually crumbles because of its own, bad decisions. And a lot of people think that America is on the brink of that as well, because honestly, things get too good. There's a quote that says that bad times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. And so it's an interesting cycle that essentially hard times or valleys can create strong people because they're forced to adapt out of necessity. And so because you've got hard times, you become strong, and strong people can create good times, but then good times create weak people, and then weak people create bad times. And that's what we see when someone becomes successful is they become mentally and emotionally soft and weak. They become dull. Their blade becomes dull. They stop having a vision. I love the quote from Viktor Frankl. He says, "What man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal." What happens often as people become successful is that they stop having a worthwhile goal to strive and struggle for. And instead, they become complacent, they become lazy, they become sloppy. They actually also have a shift subconsciously. They shift from what is called an approach orientation, where they're approaching goals. They shift over to an avoid orientation, where they're trying to avoid failure. They may have a lot of money and they're trying to avoid losses. And so everything they're doing is trying to prevent negative things from happening rather than trying to promote their next big win. And when you're overly preventative, or when you're overly avoidance focused, and your focus is all on just protecting yourself, what you focus on expands. You end up creating problems because that's what you're focused on. That's what you're expecting. Pulling this together, Will Smith obviously had an upper limit problem. He pulled himself down subconsciously. His private problems became public problems. How he did anything is how he did everything. He had a really low deserve level. He was the seller in his relationship with his wife, and that desperation infected him subconsciously and showed him that he didn't believe he deserved the success that he had worked so hard to earn. These are some of the reasons why Will Smith probably did that right before his biggest victory. And it's an invitation for all of us to be really careful, because right before we're about to make the victories and successes that we want, often that's when we subconsciously self-sabotage the most, because emotionally we don't believe we deserve it. So what are some of the ways that you can increase your emotional deserve level? As Gary Katie would talk about, but just in general, subconsciously, how do you raise your subconscious baseline, and how do you actually raise your level of deserve? One of them is to have a little bit more integrity in all aspects of your life. This goes back to how you do anything is how you do everything. If you have low integrity in aspects of your life, like if you don't keep your word, confidence comes by keeping your word with yourself. And so if there's areas where you're lying to yourself or lying to others, that's going to have a huge hit on your subconscious. That's going to have a huge hit on your confidence, on your integrity, and that's going to make you believe you don't deserve it. And so if your life is out of alignment in any area, it's important to just come forth. I love the quote, "All progress starts by telling the truth," and also raising your standards. This is why it's really important to have a 10x vision of your future self, is because once you have a bigger vision of your future self, you start to see all the areas of your life that are out of alignment. This is why Frankl said that man doesn't need a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. Because when you have a bigger future to strive for, you actually are inspired in the present to clean up the areas of your life that are out of alignment with that vision. It invites radical self-honesty. It invites huge integrity to just own that you've made some mistakes, to clean up the areas of your life that are messy, even if it's just a messy car. Again, as you clean up small areas of your life, you start to be able to clean up the bigger areas of your life. And if you're committed to a bigger future, you will see very clearly all of the areas you need to clean up. It's a huge invitation to just clean up your life so that you can raise the level of belief and emotions that you deserve it. Also just acknowledging that you do deserve what you want. I love the quote from Napoleon Hill. He said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve." It's not hard to conceive mentally a better future. It's emotionally believing it. And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. He says that emotionally we resist what we want. And so one of the ways to actually stop resisting it is to have future-based gratitude, to be grateful for the goals that you have and to see them as already done, and to just experience gratitude, to experience peace, to experience acceptance, rather than coming from a place of unhealthy need or want. You come from a much higher place of knowing that this is who you are, knowing that this is what you want, knowing that this is what you deserve. Stephen Covey said, to know and not do is to really not know. And so once you know that what you want is yours, once you know that you can be who you want to be, you'll start to do what your future self would do and have what your future self could have. You'll stop doing the things that held you back. You'll stop being triggered by your past. You'll let go of your former self. So just as one word of kind of caution and my hope for Will Smith, back to the idea of peaks and valleys. One of the things that Spencer Johnson talks about is that the best things that happen in people's lives happen because of what they do in their valleys. It could be just a situation where you lose your job. It could be because of a massive error that you made. You can transform any negative experience into a gain, into progress and improvement. You can turn a valley into bigger peaks. I actually believe that if Will Smith genuinely learns from this experience, he could turn this into bigger peaks in his future. It would take massive humility, though. It would take a realization that he is the cause of his own problems. I love the quote from Neville Goddard that you never see the outside world, you only see your own reaction to it. You never see the outside world, you only see your reaction to it. If, for example, I get angry at one of my kids because of what they're doing, I'm not seeing my kid, I'm just seeing my reaction. It's important for Will Smith to acknowledge that he's the one who caused this. He's not the victim. He let all of this happen in his marriage and in other areas of his life. And if he's willing to face the truth and then learn from it and be humble and learn, I believe he can turn this into much bigger peaks into his future. I believe that he could turn this into far greater success than anything he's ever achieved. But the absolute hardest thing for people to handle is perceived loss. It's the thing that we avoid more than anything. It's called loss aversion in psychology. According to Dr. Daniel Kahneman, who's basically a Nobel Prize winning economist / psychologist, we avoid loss far more than we seek gain. Like as humans, losing feels a lot worse than gaining feels good. We quickly adapt to our gains, but if you lose even a little bit of ground, your confidence might be forever shattered. Even though you could turn that loss, that momentary loss, into knowledge, wisdom, and experience and massive gains. It's like if someone loses their job, they could actually turn that into something really positive. Sometimes they say that a lot of times you don't want to go too high because the fall could kill you. And in this case, the fall might be so far for Will Smith in his perceived head, right? He might think, I'll never be able to get back there. That sense of having gone backwards, that sense of loss could be so crippling to him that his confidence is forever shaken. And I hope that doesn't happen to him because really it is our failures that can make us. And people with a growth mindset learn from their failures. People with a growth mindset aren't afraid to fail. People with a growth mindset aren't afraid of acknowledging that they made mistakes. It's also important to realize, and there's a lot of research on this when it relates to future self, that your future self is a different person than you are. Just like your past self is a different person than you were. You're not the same person you were a year ago or even a week ago. You've learned things. And I can promise you, Will Smith is not the exact same guy he was when he walked up and slapped Chris Rock. I guarantee this experience has shooken him to the core, and he's not the same guy. He sees things very differently having gone through this experience. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to translate this experience into gains. That doesn't mean he's going to translate this experience into growth and wisdom and turn it into bigger peaks in his future, but I hope he does. As long as he doesn't focus on how far he feels he went backwards, if he doesn't focus on the perceived losses that he just accumulated, and instead looks in the mirror, is honest, and acknowledges that this may be the best thing that could have happened to him. That's really what post-traumatic growth is. Post-traumatic growth is where you take any negative experience and you turn it into greater meaning, sense of purpose. You use it to heal your past. He could use this experience to heal his trauma. He could use this experience to have greater meaning in his life. He could use this experience to create much better growth and progress, true progress. And by the way, true progress isn't always translated in external success. True progress is how far you evolve as a person internally. And so if Will Smith can turn this into true progress, which is internal progress, emotional progress, subconscious progress, healing of the traumas, upgrading his sense of what he believes he deserves, cleaning the areas of his life that are clearly toxic, getting those small wins, and cleaning up the areas of his life that are out of alignment with his values and his sense of future, he will then move forward as a person. And I hope he does, because I hope the best for everyone, including Will Smith. I hope you enjoyed this. My name is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Hope you enjoyed the psychological breakdown. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like it. If you want, down below, you can click and get the free Kindle of The Gap and the Gain, which breaks down a lot further how to turn any experience into a gain. I wrote that book with Dan Sullivan. Have a beautiful day.